In 1983, Ray Williams was assigned to UNTSO in the Middle East as a peacekeeper. He served on 2 stations, initially on the Golan Heights and then finally into Beirut. It was the civil war which was raging in Beirut at the time that caused the ongoing trauma for Ray and many others. This has led to the push for the reclassification of this service, not just for Ray, but for all peacekeepers who were caught up in the crossfire of this civil war during the period 1983 to 1984. Ray is joined by fellow peacekeeper Paul Copeland, who is now advocating on Ray's behalf for recognition by the Australian government to have these ADF members that were placed in untenable situations and yet have been denied the recognition for having served in an actual war zone. When you were assigned in there, 2 weeks before that, in October,
yep,
300 French and US peacekeepers were killed by truck bombs.
Yes, they were.
Why didn't that have any bearing on the Australian government and Department of Defence for their decision-making process on what was warlike service and non-warlike service?
Well, would you believe the stupidity of it all is that Defence wrote back and said they weren't attached to UNTSO, so therefore it doesn't count.
So, despite them dying in a violent conflict with truck bombs driven through their barracks, and I believe a couple of Lebanese civilians also were killed, that the Australian government states that that is not relevant to declaring your service warlike.
No, because they weren't part of UNTSO.
So it came to a point, particularly in early February 1984, when West Beirut was being highly targeted. Most of the Western embassies that were located there were evacuated, including the Australian Embassy. As a matter of fact, embassy staff were cowering, sheltering away from the artillery and rocket fire that was striking the Australian Embassy at that time, and were waiting for a break in the fire to evacuate. It took some time to get out. The multinational force was unable to prevent those attacks. So what occurred after those embassies were evacuated in February, we then saw the gradual withdrawal of the multinational force out of Lebanon completely. The last remnants were the US Marines that stuck around and protected the US Embassy, and the US Embassy was evacuated onto the warships that were with the 6th Fleet at that time in the Mediterranean. Australia did not send another ambassador back to Beirut after February 1984 until 1995. That gives you the idea of the threat that was actually available at that time. That meant that they had to take their embassy staff out for their own safety. You got to ask the question, with Ray's case and Major Joe Casey's case, they weren't evacuated out for their own safety. They were remaining in position, and they were undertaking their duties as they were doing before the actual conflict came to the point where it did at that time. Royal Australian Air Force Hercules transport aircraft flying into Ton Son Airport in Saigon, evacuating orphans and taking off, that was war service. They weren't armed, they had no rules of engagement, they had no orders for opening fire. Yet Ray was unarmed, no rules of engagement, orders for opening fire in Beirut. Doesn't get war service, but these guys do.
Well, probably the culmination of all this is that we don't have or have not had the right of reply to these, not so much allegations, but the statements put forward by Defence. Our arguments haven't been listened to. Right, we can't countermand anything or dispute the references because we're not entitled to it. So this brings us down to, why can't we have a independent review by a semi-judicial person that has some sort of background knowledge of Defence activities? But keep it at arm's length from Defence and DVA. Don't be influenced by them. Let's have an independent umpire, right? And that not only would serve the beneficial to my case, because we would have the opportunity to put forward our case and our views and countermand what defence is saying, but it would also give these other people from these other deployments the opportunity as well. And why not? And if everybody agrees to abide by the umpire's decision, so be it.
Would you like to see it under a person or a panel?
I think a panel, because one person can be biased. They don't, may not have a full understanding, right? I think a panel would be more appropriate, right? And they need to interview those people that are on the ground. They need to interview people that, you know, have a story to tell.
Would you like to see veterans represented on that panel?
I certainly would, yes.
Rather than just be made up of bureaucrats out of Canberra?
Yes, I do. Yes, I would.
So Ray, all these years later, is there anything else you'd really like to say?
There are other people out there that have done similar and been exposed to similar situations I have, and they too need to be recognised. They really do. Because I'm sure they've had their traumas in life, and it's affected them probably in many ways. Right? It's affected me in a number of ways, and it's affected other veterans as well. And Defence is not doing their homework. They're not doing justice to the veterans.